My name is Natalie Rowe, 36 years old, and I never imagined I'd confront my sister and my entire family like that. Not with screaming, but with one quiet truth that left the whole room silent. They shamed me for being divorced, mocked me behind my back, and worst of all, they defended the very people who destroyed my marriage. So this year, I showed up to Christmas dinner with someone they never expected. And the moment she saw him, her whole world cracked. What I said next, I only had to say it once. If you've ever been betrayed by the people closest to you, you'll feel this. Tell me where you're watching from, and if this hits home, hit subscribe and stay a while. The crystal clinked softly as I set my wineglass down on the white linen. My hand trembled, just enough to make the silver ring I wore tap against the stem. The dining room smelled like rosemary and red meat, my mother's Christmas roast, and fake pine from the plastic garland she hangs over the fireplace every year. The same one since 2001. Nothing ever changes in this house. Nothing except me. Across from me, Michelle tilted her head like she always does when she's pretending to be interested in someone else's life. Her diamond earrings flashed under the chandelier as she said, "So, Natalie, still single?" I smiled. Polite. Controlled. Practiced. The kind of smile I wear like armor now. The kind that doesn't flinch. She knew what she was doing. They all did. My mother shifted in her chair like she was trying to suppress a smirk. My father stared at his plate, carving his lamb too perfectly for someone just eating dinner. And Greg, my sister's husband, didn't look at me at all. Which was interesting, because he used to. I adjusted my napkin and said, "Actually, I brought someone this year." That made Michelle blink. My mother stiffened. Forks paused midair. "Oh," she asked, blinking too many times. "Is he joining us later?" I looked at the entryway. Any second now. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Let me rewind, just a little. Not too far. Just enough to explain how we got here. It's been 16 months since my divorce. Not that anyone here cared to ask how I've been. I used to believe that if you broke the rules in this family, they'd punish you by ignoring your pain. Now I realize it's not punishment. It's habit. They've always been that way. The first time I told them I was leaving Ethan, my mother actually said, "Don't say that in front of the children," meaning Michelle's kids, not mine, because I don't have any. My father just said, "Well, that's disappointing," like I'd spilled wine on a church pew. And Michelle? She asked if I'd tried praying harder. What they never asked was why. They didn't want to know that I found texts on his phone. They didn't want to know that I woke up to an empty bed more times than I could count. That he'd stopped touching me, but never stopped charming the room. They wanted the illusion, and I destroyed it. So I became the disappointment, the bitter one, the career girl, the cautionary tale for Michelle's daughter. At first, I thought maybe time would thaw them, that maybe this Christmas would be different, that maybe I'd be welcomed like a woman rebuilding her life, not shamed for losing a man who'd already left me long before the papers were signed. But last week I got a message. From Greg, my sister's husband. It was short. Simple. "We should talk." Back at the table, the doorbell echoed again. My father stood quickly, too quickly, like he wanted to stop it, or maybe control it. I touched his wrist gently. "I've got it." I walked slowly through the hallway, past the family portraits my mother refuses to take down, my high school photo in that emerald green dress, Michelle's engagement photo with Greg, and the framed newspaper clipping of my father getting awarded Citizen of the Year in 1999. I opened the door, and there he stood. Tall, handsome in that calculated way, navy coat, clean shave, slight smirk, not Greg, but someone who made everyone uncomfortable by his very presence. I turned and said, just loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Everyone, this is Mark." There was a second, just one, of pure, undistilled silence. You could feel the heat drain from the room. Michelle's fork slipped off her plate with a clink. My mother didn't breathe. My father whispered something under his breath, because they all knew who Mark was, and who he used to be married to. Not me. Not anymore. 3 years ago, Mark was married to a woman named Helen. Helen, who wore designer heels and hosted charity galas. Helen, who turned heads in church pews and talked over everyone at the table. Helen, who introduced me to Ethan, and who was, unbeknownst to everyone, the reason Ethan left, because Mark found a video. A video on Helen's iPad. A video of her, with Ethan, in my bed. He sent it to me. That's how I found out. That's how I knew. We never spoke about it after. Not until last week. I didn't plan on bringing him here. Honestly, I didn't even know what I was doing when I agreed to meet him at that cafe. But when I saw him, tired eyes, neat button-down, calm demeanor, something in me shifted. We didn't talk revenge. We talked about healing. And then we talked about truth. And what people do to survive silence. And what it means to be used as a scapegoat for someone else's story. And then we made a decision. Not to cause chaos, but to end the lie. Gracefully, publicly, elegantly. Now, back at the table, Mark pulled out the chair beside me and sat with perfect posture, like he belonged. Michelle's face was a painting of panic, eyes darting, fingers twitching, throat swallowing nothing. And my mother? My mother clutched her wine glass like it might float away. So, I said gently, slicing into the silence like it was prime rib-y. What were we saying about second chances? Mark smiled, calm as ever. Lovely house, by the way. Catherine? Is that rosemary I smell? My mother blinked. Once, twice, and nodded. And just as I took a sip of my wine, Michelle pushed her chair back, a sharp, metallic screech, and stood up. I need to speak with you, she said, eyes locked on me, not even pretending anymore. Now, I dabbed my lips with my napkin and stood. In the kitchen. She nodded, jaw clenched. As I walked behind her, I caught Mark's gaze, steady, grounded, and I nodded once, because I wasn't here to cause a scene. I was here to reclaim my voice. And nothing would be louder than the truth said calmly. In the kitchen, Michelle shut the door behind us so fast the utensils on the counter jumped. What the hell are you doing? She hissed. I stared at her for a second. Really stared. At the sister who always had more, who always needed to win, who once cried because I wore white to her rehearsal dinner. I'm sitting down to dinner, I said. With Mark? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is funny? You think this makes you look strong? Dragging him here like some what? I asked. My voice was quiet. Too quiet. Her jaw tensed. You're a mess, Natalie. I tilted my head. Maybe. But I didn't sleep with someone else's husband. She froze. Her eyes darted for a way out, and found none. Excuse me? She whispered. I took a step forward and handed her my phone, already open to the photos, already zoomed in. She looked down, and her face went white. Before the scandal, before the divorce, before the betrayal made me unrecognizable to the people who raised me, my life looked, at least from the outside, like the picture of grace. I lived in a small but sunlit loft in downtown Charleston. Brick walls, olive trees on the balcony, coffee rings on my sketchbooks from long nights spent designing interiors for homes I'd never afford. But I loved it. It was mine. And I built it with hands that had once been told they were only made for holding someone else's future. My days were soft and structured. Morning walks to the corner cafe, oat milk lattes, checking emails while the city hummed. Clients would stop by for design consultations, and I'd show them mock-ups with warm tones and little splashes of rebellion. A cobalt chair here, a velvet green backsplash there. I always said, a home should feel like your insides turned into walls. Funny. That's what Ethan never understood. He liked things clean, predictable. He'd come home and straighten the picture frames I deliberately tilted. He said it looked off when the couch pillows didn't match the rug. He called it taste. I called it control. But back then, I didn't see it. Or maybe I did and just chose to love him anyway. We met at a wedding. My friend Hannah's. I was 28. He was 33, wore a navy suit and carried himself like a man who could fix things with silence. That intrigued me. I'd always been drawn to stillness, maybe because I never had any growing up. My family isn't loud, they're just sharp. Conversations are blades dressed as blessings. Love is conditional. Approval is a reward. I learned young that silence was safer than honesty. So when Ethan stood across from me at that bar, sipping whiskey and watching the room like he didn't owe it anything, I wanted to know what he wasn't saying. He told me later he felt peace when I spoke. I told him I liked how he listened. We married 2 years later. Small ceremony. Simple vows. No drama. Michelle brought Greg, of course. Back then, he was just the finance guy. All teeth and tailored jackets. But even then, I noticed how he watched people. Especially me. Not in a creepy way. In a curious one. As if he was always calculating who had power in the room. For a while, it was good. Ethan and I lived in a townhouse near the river. He made me tea in the mornings. I designed his home office. We tried for a baby, twice. Both times it didn't stick. The second time, I cried in the shower while Ethan worked late. When he got home, I told him I was fine. And he said, "That's good." After that, I stopped saying much at all. There were signs, subtle ones. He started complimenting my sister more than me. Michelle always knows what to bring to dinner. He praised her parenting, her decor, her confidence. Michelle has it all figured out, doesn't she? I laughed it off. I even agreed. Because growing up, Michelle was always the template. She got straight A's. Could do better. She wore pearls and ballet flats. I wore boots and chipped nail polish. She was the daughter my mother showed off at church. I was the one she prayed for behind closed doors. But I didn't mind. Not then. Because I believed, deeply, that being different was still worthy of love. That's the assumption I held. That if I stayed kind, worked hard, loved well, I would be accepted. By Ethan. By my parents. By Michelle. That being the quiet one, the good listener, the helper, would protect me. But silence doesn't protect you. It isolates you. My mother never liked messy. When I called her to say I was thinking about leaving Ethan, just thinking, she asked if I'd been drinking. I hadn't. I was just tired of sleeping beside a man who hadn't touched me in months, tired of scheduling therapy and going alone, tired of wondering why my intuition always sounded like a whisper next to everyone else's opinion. I told her I found something on his phone, a message, a photo, and she said, "Natalie, be careful. Men don't like dramatic women." I was quiet. For a long time. Then I said, "He's sleeping with someone else." There was a pause. Then her voice, flat and clear. "Well, no marriage is perfect?" Michelle didn't even call. She sent a text. "Sorry to hear. Maybe space is what you two need." Space. As if I hadn't already lived in silence, as if I hadn't already disappeared. It got worse before it got louder. I started to notice things. Ethan would step out during dinner and come back with a different cologne. He kept a second toothbrush in his glove compartment. He changed his passwords, but not his patterns. And then came the night I opened our shared Dropbox by mistake. Inside, a folder labeled Scans. I clicked it. Inside were screenshots, texts, emails, images of her. Not just any her, Michelle. At first, I didn't believe it. I stared at the images like they might rearrange themselves if I looked long enough, but they didn't. because truth doesn't blink. It was her perfume I smelled on his coat. Her laugh I heard in his background calls. Her words he repeated back to me like they were his own. Michelle had been living inside my marriage for months. Maybe longer. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I packed a bag, left a note, filed for divorce, and vanished. My parents told everyone it was irreconcilable differences. Michelle sent a Christmas card with her children's faces, but not mine. Greg? He never reached out. Not until last week. When he did, his message was short. I think you need to know the full story. We met at a hotel lounge. He looked tired. Different. And what he told me, that Michelle had done it before. That I wasn't the first sister she had tried to outshine. That she'd taken things from him too. That he had stayed for the kids. That she made it easy to lie. I didn't know what to believe. But then he showed me something. A video. One Michelle sent to Ethan years ago. The same lingerie. The same bedroom. The same smirk. It was dated 6 months before my wedding. I sat there, stunned. And Greg said quietly, "She doesn't love people, Natalie. She collects them." That night, I walked the city, past the park where Ethan proposed, past the bakery where Michelle and I used to get coffee. I walked and walked until my feet hurt and the fog rolled in over the water. And somewhere between the pier and my front door, a thought bloomed. Maybe the only way to end this story is to write a new chapter in front of them. Not for revenge, for release. Because if silence had kept me small, maybe truth would set me wide open, not to hurt them, but to stop letting them hurt me. And so, this Christmas, I accepted the invitation. I brought Mark, and I wore my silence like silk. Because sometimes, the loudest reckoning doesn't come from screaming. It comes from arrival. And that's where we are now. In a kitchen. My sister holding my phone. My mother beyond the door. And everything she built, her image, her lies, her superiority, about to unravel. Because the person they shamed for being divorced isn't leaving quietly anymore. She didn't deny it. That was the part that stunned me more than the photos, more than the dates, more than the bitter burn of recognition. Michelle just looked at the screen in my hand, then up at me, and said, quietly, "I didn't think you'd ever find out." As if that was the real crime. The discovery. Not the betrayal itself. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not like glass. It cracked like paper tearing. Soft, silent, irreversible. "You," I whispered, suddenly unable to breathe. I had rehearsed this moment so many times. In the shower. In the car. In dreams that jolted me awake. I thought I'd scream. Cry. Throw something. Slap her. Fall to the floor. Instead, I froze. Completely. She placed the phone back on the counter with gentle fingers, like it was a napkin, not a confession. Her hands didn't shake. Mine did. "Natalie," she said, "you weren't happy. You said that all the time." I blinked. "What does that have to do with—" "You were always waiting for someone to save you from that marriage. Maybe I just gave it a push." My chest burned. Not because of her words, but because some part of me, some broken, distorted part, believed her. Was that the worst part? That somewhere, deep in my gut, I wondered if I had invited it. If being quiet, soft, compliant, had made me disposable. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't stab you. It convinces you that maybe you deserved the blade. I didn't speak as I walked out of the kitchen. Didn't look at Mark. Didn't say goodbye. I grabbed my coat, walked out the front door, and kept walking. Again. Charleston was cold that night. The kind of cold that slides under your collar and presses against your ribs. The streets were quiet. My heels clicked like a metronome, and my breath came out in sharp little clouds. I called an Uber, but then I canceled it. I couldn't sit still. I walked through the historic district like a ghost, past lit windows and Christmas wreaths, families clinking glasses, people living lives I no longer recognized. What was I now? Not a wife, not a daughter. A sister in title only, a woman who'd been loved falsely and judged unfairly. I ended up at the Battery, staring out at the black water, my coat too thin, my thoughts too loud. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed, didn't open the blinds, didn't respond to the text from Mark. "I'm sorry you had to do that alone." He didn't ask where I went. He knew I needed space. What I didn't expect was the voicemail from Michelle. "Hey, I know you're angry. I get it. But don't ruin everything. Mom and Dad can't know. It'll destroy them. And honestly, I'm not the only one who made mistakes." I replayed that line 3 times. Don't ruin everything. As if I was the grenade, as if she hadn't already pulled the pin and dropped it at my feet. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was slow, like drowning in dry air. I stopped designing, canceled all my clients for the month. I couldn't bear to choose color palettes when everything inside me felt gray. I forgot to eat. Then I remembered, and ate too much, and cried because I didn't know why I couldn't feel normal. I tried yoga, then wine, then silence. Silence was the worst, because silence gave space to the lies I told myself, that I was naive, that I should have been smarter, that if I'd been prettier, more exciting, more whatever, maybe none of it would have happened. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It makes you question the parts of you that were once beautiful. 2 weeks later, I found the ring. I was cleaning out a drawer I hadn't opened in months, and there it was. Ethan's wedding band, tucked in a small black box beneath some old receipts. I stared at it like it might speak, and in a way, it did. It told me I wasn't grieving the man. I was grieving who I became trying to keep him. One night, maybe 3 weeks in, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not for anyone, not for revenge, just to say it out loud. I wrote everything I never said in the marriage, everything I swallowed in that kitchen with Michelle, everything I wanted my mother to ask me, and never did. I wrote letters I would never send. One to Ethan, one to Michelle, one to the woman I used to be. That one was the hardest. I started seeing a therapist. Quiet woman named Anne, office that smelled like cinnamon and old books. She asked me once, "What part of yourself are you mourning?" I told her, "The part that thought loyalty was enough." And she said, "Loyalty without reciprocity is self-abandonment." I cried for 40 minutes after that. Not because she was right, but because I had no idea who I was without that identity. The good one, the loyal one, the helper, the soft place to land. I didn't want to be angry. But anger is clarifying. It shows you where the wound is, and who kept cutting it open. Michelle kept texting. At first, excuses, then guilt, then manipulation. "She's spiraling," Mark told me one afternoon when we met for coffee. "She keeps saying you're going to ruin her family." I sipped my drink and said nothing, because that's the thing about guilt. It sounds like blame when it's scared. I didn't respond to Michelle. Not until she sent the last message. "If you say anything to Mom or Dad, you're dead to me." And I stared at those words. Dead to me. As if I hadn't already been invisible for years. And in that moment, I felt something shift. Not rage, not pain. Clarity. So I called my mother. I told her I'd like to have dinner. Just the two of us. Neutral ground. She agreed, but with a clipped tone that said she'd already been briefed by Michelle. We met at a little restaurant on East Bay, Italian place. White tablecloths, wine glasses that sparkled like they were trying to distract from the conversation. She wore pearls. I wore jeans and a blazer. She didn't ask how I was. She opened with, "I hope you're not trying to make this worse." I laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just tired. "I'm not making anything worse," I said. "I'm just not protecting anyone's illusions anymore." She pursed her lips. "We all make mistakes." I leaned in. "Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary. Sleeping with your sister's husband for 2 years. That's a choice." Her face didn't move, but her hands curled under the table. "I thought you loved this family," she said, and I looked her straight in the eye. "I do. That's why I won't lie for it anymore." The breakdown was never just about Ethan, or Michelle, or the betrayal. It was about waking up to the role I'd played in my own erasure, and realizing that every time I stayed silent, I gave someone else permission to define me. That's the collapse. Not the moment your heart breaks, but the moment you realize you handed it over, piece by piece, hoping someone would protect it, and now, I want it back. I stopped answering my phone. Not just Michelle. I silenced the whole world. No clients, no friends, no texts. I told myself I was resting, healing, but I wasn't. I was disappearing. There were days I didn't shower. Nights I sat on the kitchen floor with a bottle of wine and leftovers I didn't remember ordering. I kept the TV on low, just so the silence wouldn't feel so absolute. I couldn't bear to hear my own thoughts echo. I read articles about grief, not just the kind where someone dies, the kind where who you thought you were dies too. They called it ambiguous loss. No funeral, no closure, just absence. I started sleeping with the blinds closed. The sun felt like too much responsibility, too alive, too honest. And I didn't feel honest anymore. I wasn't who I said I was. I wasn't okay. I wasn't strong. I was wreckage and pearls. Even my dreams were off. One night, I dreamed I was running through my parents' house, but all the doors were missing. Rooms led into each other endlessly. No privacy, no exits. I woke up sweating, tangled in sheets, and all I could think was, they never gave me a room of my own. Not really. One morning, I found myself in front of a mirror I'd been avoiding. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Red eyes, brittle hair, a wrinkle forming between her brows like a question she couldn't stop asking. I grabbed scissors from the drawer and, without thinking, chopped off 4 inches of my hair, just enough to feel new, just enough to pretend I had control. It looked awful, but I kept it, because it felt like a line in the sand. That was the day I went back to Anne, the therapist. Quiet voice, always in linen. She never told me what to do, just asked questions that landed like truth bombs in slow motion. "How are you?" she asked, and I answered honestly for once. "I'm lost." She didn't flinch. She just nodded. What does lost feel like? Like I don't belong anywhere, like I'm either too much or not enough. Like I left something behind, and now I don't know how to live without it. "Did you lose a person?" she asked. I shook my head. I lost a version of myself, and maybe a future I wanted. For weeks, I tried to rebuild. I signed up for pottery classes, didn't go, downloaded a dating app, deleted it after one message, lit candles for ambiance and let them burn out without noticing, posted a photo on Instagram with the caption, "Healing is messy," then archived it before anyone could like it. I wasn't healing. I was hiding in a prettier box. Then came the brunch. A friend from college, Lila, invited me out, said I needed air, sun, maybe a mimosa. I said yes. I even wore lipstick. The place was packed, women in straw hats and couples taking selfies. For a second, I felt like myself. I laughed. I ordered the French toast. I told a joke and the table roared. It felt like life was coming back. And then I saw her, Michelle. 3 tables away, perfect hair, perfect posture. laughing with two other women I vaguely recognized from church circles. And beside her, my mother, wearing pearls, pouring tea, like nothing happened. I stared, stomach sinking. Lila noticed. "Hey, you okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I just forgot something in my car." I never came back. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel like it might stop the trembling. They had brunch together. After everything, no one told me, no one warned me. They just moved on. Without me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a phase for them. I had been cut out, neatly, quietly, like trimming fat off a roast. I went home and cried in the bathtub. No music, no candles, just me and the sound of water echoing against tile. I cried so hard I didn't know if I was drowning or releasing. I cried for the 10-year-old girl who always tried to be smaller at dinner. For the teenager who didn't go to prom because Michelle told her the dress looked cheap. For the woman who walked down the aisle while her sister kept a secret so vile, it rewrote her entire marriage. I cried because no one ever protected me. Because I thought loyalty earned you love. Because I believed I was safe, if I just behaved. But now, I knew better. A few days later, Anne gave me a strange assignment. "Write a eulogy," she said. "For who?" "For the version of you that stayed silent." I didn't do it right away. But when I did, something shifted. I wrote about the girl who thought love meant shrinking. I wrote about the woman who made herself palatable for people who only consumed her. And at the end, I wrote this line. "She deserved peace, but she settled for permission," and I cried again. But softer this time, because I knew I had to let her go. That's when Mark reached out again. We hadn't spoken since the night I walked out. His message was simple. "I understand if you're not ready, but I have something you might want to see." I said yes. We met at a park, neutral ground, families playing nearby, children squealing in the distance. He looked tired, but kind. He pulled out his phone and handed me a video. "Michelle left her iPad at my place during one of her drop-offs," he said. This was still synced. The video was old. Michelle, on the phone, talking to someone. I listened, and what she said made my stomach turn. "She'll never leave him. She's too afraid. Natalie needs to feel like she's better than someone. That's how she survives." She laughed. It was cruel. Sharp. Greg's voice answered faintly. "She's your sister." And Michelle. "Exactly. I know how to keep her in line." I gave the phone back, slowly, and I realized I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been manipulated, studied, used as a mirror that made her feel shinier. I drove home in silence, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to stoop. I was going to show up. With grace. With truth. With everything she feared the most, my clarity. But there was one more thing I had to do before I could move forward. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Michelle. To my parents. A real letter. Pen on paper. I told them I loved them. I told them I was hurt. And I told them I was stepping back. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't keep bleeding for their silence. I mailed it the next morning. It wasn't revenge. It was release. The final sacrifice. I deleted Michelle's number. Archived old photos. Took down the wedding picture still framed in my hallway. Bought a new rug. Bold and colorful. Completely mismatched. I sat in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the soft hum of a home that finally felt like mine again. And I whispered aloud, just once, "I'm not lost anymore. I'm free." I didn't become a new woman overnight. There was no movie montage, no makeover with glittering eyeshadow and slow-motion walks through golden light. There was just consistency. Quiet, invisible consistency. I started waking up before the sun, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see the sky before the world touched it. I'd wrap myself in a robe, step onto the balcony, sip warm tea, and breathe. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Sometimes that was enough. Other days, I needed more. So I journaled, or stretched, or cried, not because I was broken, but because I was letting things go. I began cleaning out my life, one drawer at a time. First went the old wedding china, still boxed in the back of the closet. Then the pair of earrings Michelle gave me as a peace offering after my divorce, a piece that had been laced with silence. I donated the rug Ethan picked, sold the bookshelf I never liked. I rearranged everything, not to escape my past, but to rewrite it in my own language. I painted my bedroom deep green, not pastel, not beige, a rich, moody green that looked like truth. And I slept better than I had in years. Work changed, too. The clients I once bent over backward to impress, I started saying no to them. I stopped designing for approval and started designing for feeling. One woman, Sarah, walked into my studio and said, "I want my house to feel like a permission slip." I nearly cried. So we built that. Cobalt walls, velvet chairs, a record player in the kitchen. It was beautiful, wild, not safe. And it reminded me of who I could be if I stopped editing myself to fit inside other people's expectations. That project went viral. 2 magazines called. Then came a local TV feature, Designing from the Inside Out. I watched the segment alone, barefoot on the couch, bowl of pasta in my lap. The reporter said, "Natalie Rowe is redefining what home means." And I whispered, "Yeah, I guess I am." Anne noticed the change. During one of our last sessions, she said, "You're not angry anymore." I thought about that. "I think I'm not afraid anymore," I said. Of what? Of being misunderstood. Of being too much. Of being not enough. She smiled. "That's how you know you've healed. When you no longer need others to confirm your worth." And then came Mark. It wasn't a love story. Not yet. Just a moment. He showed up at my new office one afternoon, holding 2 coffees and a shy smile. "I saw your interview," he said. "Thought you might need fuel for the empire." I laughed, took the cup. He looked lighter, so did I. We didn't talk about Michelle or Ethan. We talked about art, grief, parents, regret. He told me he was in therapy too, that he'd stopped blaming himself for staying so long, that he was learning to be alone. I told him I was too. We sat on the balcony for an hour, no pressure, no weight, just air between 2 people who had finally stopped suffocating. When he left, he kissed my cheek. Warm, soft, no agenda. And I realized, this is what safety feels like. A few nights later, I went dancing. Real dancing. A new friend from yoga invited me. Latin night at a small bar downtown. I wore a red silk dress I almost returned months ago. And I danced. Sweaty, barefoot by the end, laughing with strangers who didn't care about my history, just my rhythm. I twirled under soft lights. I laughed until my stomach hurt. For the first time in years, my body didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. Life didn't become perfect, but it became mine. I still got sad. Still missed the version of me that had believed in family dinners and sisters who told the truth. But I stopped waiting for an apology. Because some healing doesn't come from others. It comes from choosing yourself when no one else does. The twist came on a Tuesday. I was folding laundry, humming, when my phone lit up. Unknown number. Voicemail. I pressed play, casually, expecting spam. It was my mother. "Natalie, I don't know if you'll even listen to this, but Michelle, she's unraveling. She told us some things. About Ethan, about everything. I don't know what's true anymore, but we'd like to see you. Please. I froze, not in pain, in awareness. This was the shift. They didn't believe me when I begged for it. They believed her now that she was spiraling. I sat with that, and I felt calm, because I no longer needed them to choose me. I had already chosen myself. But there was a part of me, small, maybe, that wanted to look them in the eye, not for revenge, for truth, to end the story, not with silence, but with sovereignty. That's when the invitation arrived. Christmas dinner, formal, handwritten, my name on thick cream paper, no apology, no explanation, just, please come. We want to talk. We love you. Mom. I placed the envelope beside the window, watched it for days. Then I called Mark. I got invited to dinner, I said. Are you going? I think so. Not for them. For me. He paused. You don't have to prove anything. I know. That's why I can finally go. That week, I did one thing I hadn't done in years. I went to church, alone. Not for redemption, just to sit in silence, to remember who I was before I ever belonged to anyone else's narrative. The stained glass flickered with light. The organ hummed softly. And I whispered a prayer, not for strength, not for victory. Just this. Let me be whole. The night before Christmas, I stood in front of the mirror, hair curled gently, black dress, no makeup, just red lips, poised, soft, unapologetic. I looked at myself, really looked, and I smiled. Because I wasn't walking into that house to win. I was walking in, already free. The air was too still. That was the first thing I noticed when I stepped through the front door. Not the smell of rosemary or the soft flicker of candlelight, but the stillness, as if the house itself was holding its breath. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood. I wore black, not for mourning, but for clarity. The kind of black that absorbs light and reflects none of their projections back. My coat slid from my shoulders. Mark took it, wordlessly, and hung it by the door. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His presence wasn't for protection. It was witness. The dining room was already set. Same lace runner from my childhood, same candle holders, same chairs, all in their predictable places. Like no one ever noticed how uncomfortable they were. My father rose when he saw me. So did my mother. Michelle did not. She sat at the head of the table, her hair pulled back too tightly. A white blouse, pearl earrings, flawless makeup. But her eyes were restless. That was new. I walked in slowly, sat down at the opposite end, not out of defiance, out of symmetry. Thank you for coming, my mother said first. Her voice was tentative, rehearsed. We weren't sure if you would. I folded my hands in my lap. I almost didn't. She blinked, looked down. Silence. No one reached for a drink. No one touched the rolls. Greg wasn't there. Mark was. Michelle noticed that. Her eyes flicked to him, then to me. She leaned forward slightly, smile thin. So, are you two a thing now? She asked. It was bait. I didn't take it. We're not here to talk about that, I said. My voice was even, not cold, just done. My father cleared his throat. Your mother told you about Michelle's confession? She did. Another pause. Then my mother again. It was a mistake? I tilted my head. A 2-year mistake? Michelle spoke now, her voice tight. I didn't mean to fall in love with him. I held her gaze. Calm. Clear. Then why did you do it before my wedding? Her jaw twitched. You don't understand, she said. He loved me. Did he? I asked. Or did you just need someone to choose you, no matter the cost? The room went still again. Michelle scoffed lightly. You always do this. Make yourself the victim. I took a breath, let it expand, then slowly exhaled. I'm not a victim, I said. Not anymore. She opened her mouth, then closed it. It was then I realized she wasn't angry, she was terrified, because I hadn't come to collapse. I had come whole. And there is nothing more dangerous to someone who thrives on control than a woman who no longer needs to be liked. Mark's phone buzzed silently. He glanced down, muted it. Michelle's eyes snapped to him. You're really doing this? She said. Taking her side? Mark looked at her, long and level. There aren't sides. There's just the truth. And what truth is that? He turned to me, then back to her. That she never deserved what you did to her, and you never deserved her silence. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping softly. This is too much. I turned to her. No, this is just enough. She frowned. We are a family. No, I said gently. We are a performance, and I'm no longer playing my part. My father looked pained. He reached for his glass. You've made your point, Natalie. You've always been sensitive, but this... I stopped him with one look. Not rage, not desperation, just presence. Michelle crossed her arms now, a nervous flick of her jaw. You think you're better than us now? She whispered. I smiled. Not with cruelty, with clarity. No, I said. And then I leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice calm enough to chill. I think I'm finally not you. That was it. The line. The room shifted. Michelle's lips parted. No sound came out, because what I had said, softly, honestly, wasn't an insult. It was a mirror, a reflection of the woman she could have been. If she had chosen honesty, integrity, growth, and now it was too late. She stood, knocked her wine glass slightly, red spilling into her napkin like a stain that wouldn't come out. I'm done, she muttered. And just before she turned her back, I said one last thing, not for her, but for me. You can rewrite the story, Michelle, but you can't erase me from it. She paused, but didn't turn, and then she walked away. The door closed behind her with the softest click I'd ever heard. For a moment, no one breathed. Then my mother sat again, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her fork. But I didn't stay for the rest of dinner. I stood, picked up my coat, thanked my father for the invitation, and before I left, I looked back once. At the table, the candles, the legacy of silence that had finally been broken. And I walked out, not triumphant, just whole. Mark followed me to the car. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded. I think, for the first time, yes. He opened the passenger door. I stopped him. Let's walk, I said, just for a while. We strolled down the street. Cold wind, Christmas lights, empty sidewalks. No more wait, no more pretending. Just footsteps, side by side, and peace that didn't ask for permission. The first thing I noticed when I woke up the next morning was the silence. Not the kind that hurts, not the kind that follows slamming doors or withheld love. This was different. This was peace. Soft, full silence. The kind that fills a room, not empties it. I stayed in bed for a while, just breathing, watching the morning light pool across my floor in quiet gold. I didn't rush to check my phone. I didn't make a to-do list. I just existed, without apology, without noise. Later, I walked to the cafe down the block, the one I used to avoid because I might run into someone from church or worse, from the past. I sat by the window, ordered my usual, and wrote in my journal, not to process pain, but just to be present. I wrote a single sentence. I didn't break. I returned to myself. Outside, couples strolled. Children tugged on coats. A man whistled a jazz tune under his breath. And inside, I was still. I never sent the letters. Not the one to Ethan. Not the one to Michelle. Not even the one I wrote to my mother. They sit in a drawer, sealed, untouched. Maybe someday I'll burn them, maybe I won't. But they're no longer burning me. Christmas passed quietly. No more confrontation. No dramatic calls. Just a few texts from my father, light check-ins. Nothing more. Mark invited me to his family's New Year gathering, but I said no. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to enter the new year on my own terms. Instead, I stayed in, lit candles, cooked dinner for myself, poured wine into the crystal glass I used to save for guests, and when the clock struck midnight, I opened the balcony door and let the cold wind rush in. It felt like cleansing, like starting over, not with fire, but with breath. I started dancing again, just on weekends, a community class, salsa, sometimes swing. Once, a barefoot movement workshop that made me laugh so hard I cried. I met people with soft hands and warm eyes, people who didn't ask about my past, just wanted to know what made me feel alive. I told one of them, freedom. They said, then let's never live in cages again. And we didn't. Mark and I kept in touch, gently. No pressure, sometimes coffee, sometimes silence. We respected each other's rhythms. One night, he sent me a photo of the beach, wide, empty, golden hour. The caption said, healing isn't loud, it's sand under your feet and not needing to run. And I thought, yes, exactly that. Work grew. I hired an assistant, taught a workshop, said no to a luxury client who wanted a home that felt expensive, and yes to a single mom who said, I want my kids to feel safe here. We built magic, out of color, out of light, out of truth. One night, after hanging artwork in a client's nursery, I stayed a little longer, watched the way the moonlight fell across the walls. I imagined the baby growing up in that space. I whispered, let them always feel chosen. And in that moment, I realized I had chosen myself. Every day, every breath, every quiet boundary. Spring came. With it, warm mornings, bare feet on the porch, lavender blooming in the corner pots I once thought were too much maintenance. I stopped checking who viewed my stories, stopped trying to explain myself to people who had already decided who I was, stopped waiting for them to say sorry. And in that space, I found something else. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But neutrality. And in neutrality, freedom. I keep a photo on my desk now. It's not of a person. It's a photo I took one morning, early March, the water at the pier, glass-like, just before sunrise. No filter, no edits, just stillness. It reminds me, this is who I am when no one's watching. Not bitter, not broken. Just Natalie. Sometimes I walk past the family house, not to haunt myself, just to remember, it's still the same white shutters, same roses, but it no longer pulls at me. No longer demands I perform. It's just a house now, not a home, and that's okay, because I built mine, inside my chest, inside my skin. Inside every morning, I choose gentleness over proving anything. One day, Michelle might call. One day, she might cry, apologize, ask if we can go back. And if that day comes, I'll tell her gently, there is no back, only forward, but I wish you peace. Because carrying her doesn't serve me anymore, and hating her would just bind me again. I'm not here to be her sister anymore. I'm here to be my own. And that's where this ends. Not with a dramatic kiss, not with a final blow, just a woman in her space, lit by morning light, unbothered, unclaimed, at peace.